So for those of us who walk around with the codes that I've talked about, and you're born this way, and you walk around with these codes and you've either exceeded in the material world, right? So you've accomplished in corporate or whatever your career path has been, you've been accomplished, right? The money, the degrees, the travel, the things. Or you're like, you struggled to do well in the normal world. Maybe you, like on the fringes of life, you've done your version of success over there, right? But the commonality between both of these women is that we have codes. It's inbuilt. It's not something we can be taught. It's not something that we study under a master to know. We may work with a master to develop what's within us, but it's not something that we go study to get and to learn and for somebody to tell us, because that is what gets us, okay? It's bringing out what's already within and giving more attention and more attention and more attention to it. And in my experience, being melanin dominant, and so now would be the time for me to bring in the race dynamic, which I know it can feel like a distraction and annoying, because on a level it is, many levels it is. And it's not so much the race part and the division that I want to get at, because all that stuff is constructed and it's lies. So it's not that I want to get at. What I really want to get at is, and not talk even in detail about that, but just to bring it in here as I move forward in the conversation, because it plays into what I'm noticing within myself and what is not being talked about, at least not publicly. The science of melanin, okay, the hyper intelligent. And keep in mind, melanin is it's here in the 3D, okay? It's, right, melanin here, and everybody has melanin. So this is, right, every human being has melanin. There's just different degrees of it, okay? And so the melanin itself, though, and the density and the light of it, okay? The light of it, enables the person, the individual, okay, whether they're here in California or Italy or Africa, anywhere in the world, enables that person to interact with the natural world in a hyper intelligent, supernatural way. Now, this is very real. This is not, like sci-fi. Ooh, like this is actually very real. And there's one doctor, I can't recall his name, melanin-dominant man, who his thing was he was very much about health and the foods we eat and the science of melanin. He talked about how hyperpigmented, high melanin folks taste in, what's the word he used? Essentially, he was saying all of our senses are heightened in a particular way because of being a being walking around with high intensities of melanin. And the mainstream world, right? So scientists, and it's not talked about publicly a lot, but it is talked about in smaller circles, niche circles. And please know that it's the niche circles, even in the medical world, that end up influencing the larger medical world that then becomes mainstream, okay? So quietly, and depending on what industry you're in, perhaps not so quietly, melanin is currently being studied, but it's being studied to see how it can be monetized, and as a way to simplify life for humans and how to conduct it, basically how to use it as a conductor in a major way globally. So that's being studied right now. And it's being proven. What they're having to do is they're having to create a lab version. So basically reduce the potency of the melanin to be able to use it down in a more simplified way. Because melanin in its purest form is intense. It's intense. So what does this have to do with this topic of those of us who are coded, we're born this way, to do very distinct work in our lifetimes, and why I, as a melanin dominant woman, have wanted it to be melanin dominant women who are coded and not like all women who are melanin dominant coded. Now, first I'll say, at a heart level, I do want, heart and soul level, I want all of us, no matter our skin color, who are coded to be able to create together, to rule the world together. I do. And we have yet to get to that place in consciousness where those who are coded, regardless of their skin color, can actually exist and create well. I know right now it's very much an ideal. I know there are some of us who in our hearts and souls have that. And I know it just because I know it, not because it's actually being done. Whenever in my experience, in my actual lived experience, or in watching other communities where there's mixed racing of powerful women, whatever degree of power, and it's time to really get nitty gritty. That thing that lingers deep in the unconscious mind of melanin dominant women and any other woman really, whether she's white, Asian, Latin, whatnot, swells up. And there's an area to be studied. Okay. And again, this would be a very niche topic. There's an area to be studied that has been highly suppressed. And I know this because of the codes I walk around with that have been highly suppressed, of the supernatural power and ability of melanin dominant women who are coded, who are here to do very distinct work in this world. And plays that have been made in the deep minds of humanity that makes it so incredibly threatening, that makes it inside the nervous system of the being, okay? Incredibly threatening, incredibly foreign terrain, beyond mere femininity, okay? Because there's this conversation, particularly, well, in many communities about femininity, but particularly with the One Taste community. And so hello, shout out to One Taste, who I think is doing incredible work. And their focus is very much about eros, okay? Erotic power, feminine power, which is supernatural in and of itself. It's a force for sure. And so what I'm speaking about is beyond feminine force. Okay, it's beyond feminine force. Now, I think for the times of today, that the feminine force is where we need to place our attention, because it's familiar to enough humans globally. The word femininity, the conversations of femininity, feminine power, empower, like all that is has built up webs and neural pathways inside of the minds of enough of humanity that we can lay our conversations inside that framework, and people can actually speak from them without being tripped up by language and tripped up by a sort of speed and foreignness and consciousness that would arise when we start talking about dark Black mother and the codes and the consciousness and the force and the all that is very foreign in public conversations today. And yet and still, this ultimately is where we're going. I knew this years ago. And I said years ago, I said, humanity as a whole, and particularly women, are going to have to traverse and go in certain cycles because of the play in the unconscious mind that I mentioned earlier, that the confrontation that occurs when a woman starts to meet herself. We can say all women, and then coded women, the confrontation that occurs when she meets herself, which is in part, if you're so big and bad, admit who you are. When she meets herself, and everything that's been played on in the unconscious mind is confronted. And it's similar to what I talked about in my newsletter. I release a newsletter every Monday called The Erotic Path. And I talked about how religious dogma, the entire programming as it relates to sexuality and femininity, so much of it, essentially, the body is a sin. The body is, because it's flesh, you're born as sin, you are sin. Don't trust the body. So anything out of the, your body doesn't belong to you, it belongs to God. You aren't safe in your body. Give it to a man and let him tell you what to do. Strongly, that's what's communicated. And so when any female gendered being who makes a decision to become a woman and then beyond mere femininity actually makes a commitment to be obedient to the call on her life, right? Which takes you beyond this whole masculine, feminine play. That confrontation right there and her teetering on the yes, no, and then running in circles, avoiding it, because as she meets her deeper unconscious self time and time again, which is very quiet behind closed doors, it's humbling, it's very vulnerable, it's very raw, it's very confronting. And when she starts to meet the parts of her that have been tinkered with and suppressed for so long, and yet there's that experience in her inner deepest worlds, and then it's experience out here on TikTok and at her job, and they're two very polarizing realities. And the beyond the conversation, okay, I know that's where we're going to be, etc. When we get there, because we will get there, this is where this will be the work. Actually, this will be the work required between the races. Okay, melanin-dominant women and men, particularly melanin-dominant women, and then everybody else. Okay, and so I bring this to the carpet today because I have to. I'm going to be having more conversations privately with women who I'm in connection with. Basically folks are just running in circles, it's cycles and circles, and eventually these women will exhaust themselves. It's very inevitable and predictable. They will exhaust themselves. They will try a bunch of things. I did it myself. And eventually they will tire and they will be forced to come home to who they really are, admit who they really are, and be a very unfamiliar force to humanity. And I don't know if I'll be around, alive, to see that happen, but that's what's coming. Us are doing. So shout out to Shantia. I don't know if you're here, darling. Hello, shout out to Shantia. Shantia is currently in her admission phase, admitting who she is. The humility that's required of all of us to truly know. Okay, time for that. So let me see if there's So if you are a melanin dominant woman and you know that you're coded, you have already gone in a variety of cycles that I've talked about here, where you have met different versions of yourself deeply, quietly behind closed doors. And that confrontation was terrifying. You didn't want to admit who you are, because then you know that there's a responsibility then that will be required for you to take. And maybe you felt alone up till now. You have just been unwilling to take responsibility and stand in the fullness. And this very foreignness that you are, not only to yourself, but the foreignness that you would be out in the world when you actually start to live as this authority, which you would naturally be an authority without even trying to, when you would be the steward of the codes inside of you. And so if this is you and you know you're ready, it's time, right? You've already tired yourself. You're done. You're done going in circles, giving your power away, waiting for permission. I invite you to come into my womanhood initiation coming up. And it's your opportunity to admit who you are and to if it's a good fit. And if this has spoken to you, it's very likely a good fit. If you are ready, if you are sincere, you know now is your time, and you're ready to be humble, vulnerable, and truth telling, then it's very, very likely that my womanhood initiation is perfect for you. And that's your gateway into my woman community. You'll find out more about the woman community, assuming it's a good fit during the womanhood initiation. So vet yourself by going to the link in my bio, reading the details there, and then making the decision if it's for you. Please read all the communication. So if you read and watch the video after you register, which again, you do that by going to the link in my bio, clicking it, click womanhood initiation and vet yourself. The emails that you're going to get, please read them so you know what to expect. Okay. So again, if this is for you, womanhood initiation, I'd love to see your face. Go to the link in my bio, vet yourself.